Welcome to Wiki History, where we unravel the mysteries of the past. Today, we're diving into the captivating life of Cleopatra VII, the last active pharaoh of ancient Egypt. Her story is one of power, passion, and political intrigue that shaped the course of history. If you're ready to explore the legendary queen who charmed Roman emperors and defied an empire, hit that like button and subscribe to Wiki History for more incredible journeys through time. Let's begin. Cleopatra VII, also known as Theophilopator, meaning Cleopatra father-loving goddess, was born around 70 or 69 BC and died on August 10th or 12th, 30 BC. She reigned as queen of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt from 51 to 30 BC, becoming the last active Hellenistic pharaoh. As a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, she descended from Ptolemy I Soter, a Macedonian Greek general and companion of Alexander the Great. Uniquely among Ptolemaic rulers, Cleopatra mastered the Egyptian language, alongside her native Koine Greek and several others. Her death marked Egypt's transformation into a Roman province, signaling the end of the Hellenistic period in the Mediterranean, which had commenced during Alexander's reign from 336 to 323 BC. Born in Alexandria, Cleopatra was the daughter of Ptolemy XII Auletes, who designated her as his heir before his passing in 51 BC. She commenced her reign alongside her brother, Ptolemy XIII, but their growing animosity soon ignited a civil war. Meanwhile, Roman statesman Pompey, having suffered defeat at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC against his rival Julius Caesar, sought refuge in Egypt. Despite Pompey's prior alliance with Ptolemy XII, Ptolemy XIII orchestrated Pompey's ambush and assassination before Caesar's arrival and occupation of Alexandria. This act set the stage for a dramatic confrontation between the Roman dictator and the young Egyptian rulers. Upon his arrival, Caesar attempted to mediate between the feuding Ptolemaic siblings. However, Ptolemy XIII's forces besieged Cleopatra and Caesar within the royal palace. After reinforcements lifted the siege, Ptolemy XIII met his end in the Battle of the Nile. Caesar then proclaimed Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, as joint rulers. During this time, Caesar and Cleopatra began a private affair that resulted in the birth of their son, Caesarion. Cleopatra later journeyed to Rome as a client queen in 46 and 44 BC, residing at Caesar's villa. Following Caesar's assassination and the subsequent sudden death of Ptolemy XIV, possibly by Cleopatra's command, she elevated Caesarion to co-ruler as Ptolemy XV. During the Liberator's civil war from 43 to 42 BC, Cleopatra aligned herself with the Roman Second Triumvirate, comprising Caesar's heir Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. Following their significant meeting at Tarsos in 41 BC, Cleopatra and Antony began an affair that would produce 3 children. Antony grew increasingly dependent on Cleopatra for both financial resources and military support, particularly during his campaigns against the Parthian Empire and the Kingdom of Armenia. The controversial donations of Alexandria publicly declared their children as rulers over various territories under Antony's dominion. Octavian seized upon this, portraying it as an act of treason against Rome, forcing Antony's senatorial allies to flee Rome in 32 BC and ultimately declaring war on Cleopatra. The conflict escalated, culminating in the decisive Battle of Actium in 31 BC, where Octavian's forces decisively defeated Antony and Cleopatra's naval fleet. This crushing defeat paved the way for Octavian's invasion of Egypt in 30 BC. Antony's forces were vanquished, leading to his tragic suicide. Faced with the grim prospect of being paraded publicly in Octavian's Roman triumphal procession, Cleopatra reportedly took her own life, most likely by poisoning. Her death marked the definitive end of the Ptolemaic kingdom and the Hellenistic period, solidifying Rome's dominance over the Mediterranean world and cementing Cleopatra's place as one of history's most enigmatic figures. Cleopatra's enduring legacy resonates through countless ancient and modern works of art. Roman historians and Latin poets often portrayed her critically, a perspective that influenced medieval and Renaissance literature. In ancient visual arts, she appeared in Roman busts, paintings, sculptures, cameo carvings, glass, and on Ptolemaic and Roman coinage, as well as reliefs. During the Renaissance and Baroque periods, she became a frequent subject for operas, paintings, poetry, sculptures, and theatrical dramas. Since the Victorian era, Cleopatra has evolved into a pop culture icon of Egyptomania, featuring prominently in modern applied and fine arts, burlesque satire, Hollywood films, and commercial brand imagery, cementing her status as a timeless figure. Ptolemaic pharaohs, though crowned in Memphis, primarily resided in Alexandria, a multicultural city founded by Alexander the Great. They governed as Hellenistic Greek monarchs, speaking Greek and largely refusing to learn the native Egyptian language. Cleopatra, however, was a remarkable exception. By adulthood, she was fluent in multiple languages, notably being the only Ptolemaic ruler known to have mastered Egyptian. Plutarch suggests she also spoke Ethiopian, Hebrew or Aramaic, Arabic, Syriac, Median, Parthian, and Latin. This linguistic prowess, beyond Greek, Egyptian, and Latin, underscored her ambition to reclaim former Ptolemaic territories in North Africa and West Asia, setting her apart from her predecessors. Roman intervention in Egypt significantly predated Cleopatra's reign. After her grandfather, Ptolemy IX Lathyrus, died in late 81 BC, his daughter Berenice III succeeded him. Facing opposition to a sole female monarch, Berenice III accepted joint rule and marriage with her cousin and stepson, Ptolemy XI Alexander II, an arrangement orchestrated by the Roman dictator Sulla. Ptolemy XI had his wife killed shortly after their marriage in 80 BC, and was subsequently lynched in the ensuing riot. Ptolemy XI, and possibly his uncle Ptolemy IX or father Ptolemy X Alexander I, had previously willed the Ptolemaic kingdom to Rome as collateral for loans, giving Rome a legal claim to their client state. However, the Romans opted to divide the realm among Ptolemy IX's illegitimate sons, granting Egypt to Ptolemy XII Auletes and Cyprus to another son. Cleopatra VII was born in early 69 BC, the daughter of the reigning Ptolemaic pharaoh Ptolemy XII. Her mother is presumed to be Ptolemy XII's wife, Cleopatra V Tryphena, who was also the mother of Cleopatra's older sister, Berenice IV Epiphania. Cleopatra Tryphena vanishes from historical records shortly after Cleopatra's birth. Ptolemy XII's three younger children, Cleopatra's sister Arsinoe IV and brothers Ptolemy XIII Theos Philopator and Ptolemy XIV Philopator, were born later, without their mother present. Cleopatra's childhood was shaped by her tutor, Philostratos, who instructed her in the Greek arts of oration and philosophy. During her formative years, she likely studied at the Museum, which included the renowned Library of Alexandria. In 65 BC, Roman censor Marcus Licinius Crassus advocated for Rome to annex Ptolemaic Egypt, but his proposal, and a similar one in 63 BC, were rejected. Ptolemy XII responded by offering lavish gifts and payments to influential Roman statesmen, including Pompey and later Julius Caesar. However, Ptolemy XII's extravagant spending led to his bankruptcy, forcing him to secure loans from the Roman banker Gaius Rabirius Postumus. This financial dependency deepened Egypt's ties to Rome, setting a precedent for future Roman intervention and highlighting the precarious position of the Ptolemaic kingdom under increasing Roman influence. In 58 BC, Rome annexed Cyprus, driving Ptolemy of Cyprus, Ptolemy XII's brother, to suicide. Ptolemy XII's public silence on this, coupled with ceding territory, eroded his credibility. Consequently, he was forcibly exiled from Egypt, traveling to Rhodes, Athens, and finally Pompey's villa in Italy. He spent about a year near Rome, possibly with his daughter Cleopatra, then around 11 years old. His daughter Berenice IV sent an embassy to Rome to oppose his return, but Ptolemy had the embassy leaders assassinated, a crime covered up by his Roman supporters. Denied Roman military aid, he left Rome in late 57 BC, residing at the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. Ptolemy XII's Roman financiers remained determined to restore him. Pompey persuaded Aulus Gabinius, the Roman governor of Syria, to invade Egypt, offering him 10,000 talents. Despite legal conflicts, Gabinius invaded in the spring of 55 BC, passing through Hasmonean Judea, where Hyrcanus II and Antipater the Idumean provided supplies. Mark Antony, then a young cavalry officer under Gabinius, distinguished himself by preventing Ptolemy XII from massacring Pelasgian's inhabitants and ensuring a proper burial for Archelaus, Berenice IV's husband, after his death in battle. Cleopatra, aged 14, likely accompanied this Roman expedition, a time when Antony would later claim he first fell in love with her. After his return, Ptolemy XII had Berenice IV and her wealthy supporters executed, seizing their assets. He permitted Gabinius's Roman garrison, the Gabiniani, to harass Alexandrians and appointed his financier Rabirius as chief financial officer. Within a year, Rabirius was sent back to Rome for endangering his life by depleting Egypt's resources. Despite these challenges, Ptolemy XII drafted a will naming Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII as joint heirs. He also oversaw significant construction projects, including the Temple of Edfu and a temple at Dendera, and stabilized the economy. On May 31, 52 BC, Cleopatra was formally made a regent to Ptolemy XII, as evidenced by an inscription at the Temple of Hathor in Dendera. Ptolemy XII's substantial debts, uncollected by Rabirius, were thus inherited by Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII. Ptolemy XII died before March 22, 51 BC, and Cleopatra's first act as queen was a voyage to Hermonthis to install a sacred Bacchus bull. She immediately faced severe challenges: famine from drought and low Nile floods, and lawlessness from the unemployed Gabiniani Roman soldiers left in Egypt. Inheriting her father's immense debts, she owed the Roman Republic 17.5 million drachmas. In 50 BC, when Syria's proconsul Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus sent his sons to negotiate with the Gabiniani, they were tortured and murdered. Cleopatra sent the culprits to Bibulus, but he returned them, chastising her for interfering in Roman jurisdiction. This period highlighted her precarious position and the deep-seated issues she inherited. By August 29, 51 BC, official documents listed Cleopatra as sole ruler, indicating her rejection of Ptolemy XIII as co-ruler, though a marriage likely occurred. The Ptolemaic tradition of sibling marriage, introduced by Ptolemy II and Arsinoe II, was a long-held Egyptian royal practice, though disliked by contemporary Greeks. Despite Cleopatra's efforts, Ptolemy XIII retained powerful allies, including the eunuch Pythanos, his tutor and regent, military commander Achilles, and tutor Theodotus of Chios. Cleopatra briefly attempted an alliance with Ptolemy XIV, but by autumn of 50 BC, Ptolemy XIII gained the upper hand, signing documents before his sister and establishing his first regnal date in 49 BC, escalating their rivalry. In the summer of 49 BC, as Cleopatra battled Ptolemy XIII in Alexandria, Pompey's son, Cnaeus Pompeius, arrived seeking military aid for his father, who had fled to Greece after Caesar crossed the Rubicon. In a rare joint decree, Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII agreed, sending 60 ships and 500 troops, including Gabiniani, to Pompey, which also helped settle some Roman debt. Losing the fight against her brother, Cleopatra was forced to flee Alexandria to Thebes. By spring of 48 BC, she traveled to Roman Syria with her sister, Arsinoe IV, to raise an invasion force. She returned with an army, but Ptolemy XIII's forces blocked her advance, leading her to camp outside Pelosion. In Greece, Caesar and Pompey clashed at the decisive Battle of Pharsalus on August 9, 48 BC, leading to Pompey's army's destruction and his flight to Tyre. Pompey, given his ties to the Ptolemies, sought refuge in Egypt to rebuild his forces. However, Ptolemy XIII's advisors, fearing Pompey's presence would prolong the Roman civil war, devised a scheme. Pompey arrived by ship near Pelosion, invited by a message, only to be ambushed and fatally stabbed on September 28, 48 BC. Ptolemy XIII sent Pompey's severed, embalmed head to Caesar, who arrived in Alexandria in early October. Caesar, expressing outrage, demanded Ptolemy XIII and Cleopatra disband their forces and reconcile. Ptolemy XIII arrived in Alexandria with his army, defying Caesar's demand to disband it. Cleopatra initially sent emissaries, but upon hearing of Caesar's alleged inclination for royal women, she decided to meet him personally. Cassius Dio recounts her arriving attractively dressed, charming Caesar with her wit, without informing her brother. Plutarch, however, offers a more dramatic account, alleging she was smuggled into the palace bound inside a bed sack. Regardless of the method, her audacious arrival marked a pivotal moment, establishing her direct influence with the Roman dictator, and setting the stage for the intense power struggles that would follow within the Alexandrian palace. When Ptolemy XIII discovered Cleopatra in the palace with Caesar, he incited a riot, but Caesar swiftly arrested him and calmed the crowd with his oratory. Caesar then presented Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII before the Alexandrian assembly, revealing Ptolemy XII's will, which named them joint heirs. He also proposed that Arsinoe IV and Ptolemy XIV rule Cyprus, aiming to remove rivals and appease Egyptians over Cyprus's loss. Parthenians, believing this favored Cleopatra, and that their 20,000-strong army could defeat Caesar's 4,000, ordered Achilles to attack. After Caesar executed Parthenians, Arsinoe IV joined Achilles, then had Ganymedes kill Achilles and take command. Ganymedes tricked Caesar into releasing Ptolemy XIII, who then joined Arsinoe's army, leading to the siege of the palace, trapping Caesar and Cleopatra until 47 BC. Between January and March of 47 BC, Caesar's reinforcements arrived, including those led by Mithridates of Pergamon and Antipater the Idumean. Ptolemy XIII and Arsinoe IV withdrew their forces to the Nile, where Caesar attacked them. Ptolemy XIII attempted to flee by boat but drowned when it capsized. Ganymedes may have perished in the battle, and Theodotus was later found and executed by Marcus Junius Brutus. Arsinoe IV was paraded in Caesar's triumph in Rome before being exiled to the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Cleopatra was notably absent from these events, remaining in the palace, most likely due to her pregnancy with Caesar's child, which had begun in September of 48 BC. With his consulship expired, Antony helped secure Caesar's appointment as dictator until October 47 BC, granting him authority to resolve Egypt's dynastic dispute. To avoid repeating Berenice IV's mistake of a sole female ruler, Caesar appointed the 12-year-old Ptolemy XIV as joint ruler with the 22-year-old Cleopatra in a nominal sibling marriage, though Cleopatra continued living privately with Caesar. Cyprus was eventually returned to her control. Caesar allegedly joined Cleopatra for a romantic Nile cruise, sightseeing Egyptian monuments on the pleasure barge Thalamigos, a vessel 90 meters long and 24 meters high. This voyage, though possibly romanticized, reflected Caesar's fascination with geography, as he reportedly sought the Nile's source before turning back. Caesar departed Egypt around April 47 BC, ostensibly to confront Pharnaces II of Pontus in Anatolia. It is also possible that, being married to Calpurnia, he wished to avoid public association with Cleopatra while she was pregnant with their son. He left 3 legions, later increased to 4 under Rufio's command, to secure Cleopatra's position and monitor her activities. Caesarion, Cleopatra's alleged child with Caesar, was born sometime in 47 BC, possibly on June 23. Despite a stele at Saqqara mentioning King Caesar possibly referring to him, Caesar remained publicly silent about Caesarion, perhaps due to his own childless marriage. Cleopatra, however, repeatedly declared Caesar as Caesarion's father. Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIV visited Rome in late 46 BC, staying at Caesar's villa. Caesar granted them the status of friend and ally of the Roman people, making them client rulers. Senator Cicero, among her visitors, found her arrogant. Sosigenes of Alexandria from Cleopatra's court assisted Caesar in calculating the new Julian calendar, implemented on January 1, 45 BC. The Temple of Venus Genetrix, dedicated on September 25, 46 BC in Caesar's Forum, housed a golden statue of Cleopatra, linking her as Caesar's child's mother to Venus, mother of Romans. This statue also subtly connected Egyptian goddess Isis with Roman religion, showcasing Cleopatra's significant presence and influence in Rome. Cleopatra's presence in Rome likely influenced the Lupercalia festival a month before Caesar's assassination. Antony attempted to crown Caesar with a royal diadem, a staged act to gauge public reaction to Hellenistic kingship, which Caesar refused. Cicero, present, mockingly questioned the diadem's origin, a clear jab at the queen he despised. Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March 15, 44 BC. Cleopatra remained in Rome until mid-April, hoping Caesarion would be recognized as Caesar's heir. However, Caesar's will named his grandnephew Octavian as primary heir, who arrived in Italy as Cleopatra decided to return to Egypt. Ptolemy XIV died months later, allegedly poisoned by Cleopatra, who then elevated Caesarion as co-ruler. In 43 BC, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate to restore order and pursue Caesar's assassins. Cleopatra received requests for military aid from both Caesar's assassin, Gaius Cassius Longinus, and Caesarian loyalist Publius Cornelius Dolabella. She excused herself to Cassius, citing internal issues, but sent Caesar's 4 legions to Dolabella, which Cassius captured in Palestine. Despite her governor Serapion defecting to Cassius, Cleopatra sailed her own fleet to Greece to aid Octavian and Antony. Her ships were damaged in a storm, and she arrived too late for the fighting. By autumn of 42 BC, Antony defeated Caesar's assassins at the Battle of Philippi, leading to Cassius and Brutus's suicides. By late 42 BC, Octavian controlled the Roman West, Antony the East, and Lepidus was marginalized. In summer 41 BC, Antony summoned Cleopatra to Tarsos. She initially refused, but his envoy Quintus Dellius persuaded her. The meeting aimed to clear her name regarding Cassius's support and discuss territorial exchanges, but Antony also sought a romantic relationship. Cleopatra sailed up the Kidnos River on her lavish barge, Thalamigos, hosting Antony and his officers for 2 nights. She successfully cleared her name, arguing she aided Dolabella, and convinced Antony to execute her exiled sister, Arsinoe IV, at Ephesus and her rebellious Cypriot governor, solidifying her power and influence. Cleopatra invited Antony to Egypt, and he arrived in Alexandria by November 41 BC. He was warmly welcomed by the populace, both for his role in restoring Ptolemy XII and for arriving without an occupying army. Antony embraced the lavish royal lifestyle he had observed on Cleopatra's ship. He also directed his subordinates to expel the Parthians from Anatolia and Syria. Cleopatra strategically chose Antony for future heirs, recognizing him as the most powerful Roman after Caesar. As a triumvir, Antony could restore former Ptolemaic lands to her, and by November 19, 38 BC, Cilicia and Cyprus were under her control, likely transferred earlier, during the winter of 41 to 40 BC. By late 40 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene II, both acknowledged by Antony, symbolizing a new era and her hopes for his conquests. Mark Antony's Parthian campaign was interrupted by the Perusian War, from 41 to 40 BC, initiated by his wife Fulvia against Octavian, aiming to make Antony Rome's sole leader. While some suggest Fulvia sought to separate Antony from Cleopatra, the conflict predated their Tarsus meeting. Fulvia and Antony's brother, Lucius Antonius, were besieged by Octavian at Perusia, then exiled. Fulvia died in Sicyon, Greece, attempting to reach Antony. Her death led to Octavian and Antony's reconciliation at Brundisium in September 40 BC. This agreement solidified Antony's control of the Roman East, but required him to concede Italia, Hispania, and Gaul, and marry Octavian's sister, Octavia the Younger, a significant rival for Cleopatra. In December 40 BC, Cleopatra received Herod in Alexandria as an unexpected refugee from Judea. Herod, installed as tetrarch by Antony, was at odds with Antigonus II Mattathias of the Hasmonean dynasty. Antigonus had imprisoned Herod's brother Phasael, who was executed while Herod fled towards Cleopatra's court. Cleopatra offered Herod a military assignment, but he declined, traveling instead to Rome, where Octavian and Antony named him king of Judea. This act set Herod on a collision course with Cleopatra, who coveted the former Ptolemaic territories that now formed his new Herodian kingdom, foreshadowing future conflicts over regional control. Relations between Antony and Cleopatra likely strained when he married Octavia and fathered their children, Antonia the Elder in 39 BC and Antonia Minor in 36 BC, moving his headquarters to Athens. Despite this, Cleopatra's position in Egypt remained secure. Herod, her rival, was embroiled in a civil war in Judea, receiving Roman military aid but none from Cleopatra. As the triumviral authority of Antony and Octavian expired on January 1, 37 BC, Octavia orchestrated a meeting at Tarentum, extending the triumvirate until 33 BC. With legions from Octavian and soldiers from Octavia, Antony then traveled to Antioch, preparing for war against the Parthians, setting the stage for his renewed engagement with Cleopatra. Antony summoned Cleopatra to Antioch to discuss Herod's kingdom and financial support for his Parthian campaign. Cleopatra brought her 3-year-old twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene II, to Antioch, where Antony saw them for the first time and where they likely received their surnames, reflecting Antony and Cleopatra's ambitious future plans. To stabilize the East, Antony expanded Cleopatra's domain and established loyal client rulers. Cleopatra gained significant former Ptolemaic territories in the Levant, including most of Phoenicia, Ptolemy's Akko, Syria, and the Jericho region, which she leased back to Herod. She also acquired parts of the Nabatean kingdom and Cyrene, Etanos, and Aulis in Roman Crete. These acquisitions enriched her kingdom, leading her to double-date her coinage in 36 BC, inaugurating a new era. Antony's expansion of Cleopatra's realm by ceding Roman territory was exploited by Octavian, who fueled Roman public resentment against empowering a foreign queen. Octavian promoted the narrative that Antony neglected his virtuous Roman wife, Octavia, granting her and his own wife, Livia, extraordinary privileges. 50 years prior, Cornelia Africana was the first living Roman woman honored with a statue. Now Octavia and Livia followed, their statues likely erected in Caesar's forum to rival Cleopatra's, which Caesar had placed there. This propaganda war intensified, framing Cleopatra as a threat to Roman values and highlighting the growing animosity between Octavian and Antony. In 36 BC, Cleopatra accompanied Antony to the Euphrates for his Parthian invasion, returning to Egypt due to advanced pregnancy. By summer 36 BC, she gave birth to Ptolemy Philadelphus, her second son with Antony. Antony's Parthian campaign in 36 BC became a complete disaster, largely due to Artavasdes II of Armenia's betrayal. After losing 30,000 men, more than Crassus at Carrhae, Antony arrived at Leucocome near Berytus in December, heavily drinking. Cleopatra arrived to provide funds and clothing for his battered troops. Antony, wishing to avoid returning to Rome, traveled with Cleopatra back to Alexandria to see his newborn son, highlighting her crucial support amidst his military failures. As Antony prepared for another Parthian expedition in 35 BC, Octavia traveled to Athens with 2,000 troops, likely a scheme by Octavian to embarrass Antony for his military failures. Antony accepted the troops but instructed Octavia not to go east of Athens. He and Cleopatra then traveled to Antioch, but Antony inexplicably abandoned the campaign and returned to Alexandria. Octavian capitalized on this, portraying his sister as a wronged victim, though she refused to leave Antony's household. Octavian's power grew as he eliminated Western rivals, including Sextus Pompeius and Lepidus, who was placed under house arrest after revolting in Sicily, further isolating Antony and strengthening Octavian's position. In 34 BC, Antony sent Dellius to Artavasdes II of Armenia to negotiate a marriage alliance for Alexander Helios, Antony and Cleopatra's son. When declined, Antony marched his army into Armenia, defeating their forces and capturing the king and royal family. Antony then staged a military parade in Alexandria, mimicking a Roman triumph. Dressed as Dionysus, he rode into the city on a chariot, presenting the royal prisoners to Cleopatra, who was seated on a golden throne atop a silver dais. This event drew heavy criticism in Rome, viewed as a perversion of sacred Roman rites, performed for the enjoyment of an Egyptian queen, further fueling anti-Antony sentiment. Soon after the triumph, at a gymnasium event, Cleopatra, dressed as Isis, declared herself Queen of Kings, with her son Caesarion as King of Kings. Alexander Helios was proclaimed King of Armenia, Media, and Parthia, and 2-year-old Ptolemy Philadelphus King of Syria and Cilicia. Cleopatra Selene II received Crete and Cyrene. Antony and Cleopatra may have wed during this ceremony. Antony sent a report to Rome seeking ratification for these territorial claims, known as the Donations of Alexandria. Octavian wanted to publicize it for propaganda, but Antony's supporting consuls censored it, preventing public view. This grand display solidified their dynastic ambitions and further inflamed Roman public opinion. In late 34 BC, Antony and Octavian engaged in a heated, years-long propaganda war. Antony accused Octavian of illegally deposing Lepidus and barring him from raising troops. Octavian countered, accusing Antony of unlawfully detaining the Armenian king, marrying Cleopatra while still wed to Octavia, and wrongly claiming Caesarion as Caesar's heir. This barrage of accusations and gossip shaped popular perceptions of Cleopatra, portraying her as a sorceress who brainwashed Antony, as dangerous as Helen of Troy. Pliny the Elder even claimed Cleopatra dissolved a pearl worth millions to win a bet. Such fabrications, like Antony stealing books from Pergamum, were later admitted, yet they profoundly influenced her historical image. A papyrus document, dated February 33 BC and later used to wrap a mummy, bears Cleopatra's signature, likely penned by an authorized official. This document concerns tax exemptions granted in Egypt to either Quintus Caecilius or Publius Canidius Crassus, a former Roman consul and Antony's confidant, who would later command Antony's land forces at Actium. A subscript in a different handwriting at the bottom of the papyrus reads, "Make it happen," or "So be it," which is likely the queen's autograph. This practice of countersigning documents was a Ptolemaic custom to prevent forgery, offering a rare, tangible glimpse into Cleopatra's direct involvement in her kingdom's administrative and financial affairs. On January 1, 33 BC, Octavian, in his consulship speech, accused Antony of undermining Roman freedoms, portraying him as a slave to his Oriental queen. Before their joint authority expired on December 31, 33 BC, Antony declared Caesarion Caesar's true heir to undermine Octavian. In 32 BC, Antonian loyalists Gaius Sosius and Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus became consuls. Sosius delivered a fiery speech condemning Octavian. In response, Octavian entered the Senate with armed guards, leveling his own accusations. Intimidated, the consuls and over 200 senators supporting Antony fled Rome the next day to join him, signaling the final break and the onset of open conflict. Antony and Cleopatra traveled to Ephesus in 32 BC, where she supplied 200 of his 800 naval ships. Ahenobarbus, fearing Octavian's propaganda, urged Antony to exclude Cleopatra from the campaign. However, Publius Canidius Crassus argued Cleopatra's financial and monarchical competence. Cleopatra refused Antony's requests to return to Egypt, believing that by blocking Octavian in Greece, she could better defend Egypt. Her insistence on involvement in the Greek campaign led to defections of prominent Romans like Ahenobarbus and Lucius Munatius Plancus, highlighting her strategic importance and the growing Roman discomfort with her influence over Antony, escalating the tensions towards the inevitable conflict. In spring 32 BC, in Athens, Cleopatra persuaded Antony to officially divorce Octavia. This prompted Plancus to advise Octavian to seize Antony's will, held by the Vestal virgins. Despite violating sacred and legal rights, Octavian forcefully obtained the document from the Temple of Vesta, turning it into a powerful propaganda tool against Antony and Cleopatra. Octavian publicized parts of the will, including Caesarion being named Caesar's heir, the legality of the donations of Alexandria, Antony's wish to be buried in Egypt with Cleopatra, and Alexandria becoming Rome's new capital. To demonstrate loyalty, Octavian began building his mausoleum. Elected consul in 31 BC, Octavian now had his justification for war, and Rome declared war on Cleopatra, not Antony, primarily for her military support to a private citizen. Antony and Cleopatra commanded a larger fleet than Octavian, but their crews were less trained, unlike Octavian's professional force. Antony favored blockading Octavian across the Adriatic, but Cleopatra, prioritizing Egypt's defense, overruled him, opting against a direct attack on Italy. They established winter headquarters at Patrae, Greece, moving to Actium by spring 31 BC. Despite allied kings' support, Cleopatra's conflict with Herod and an earthquake excused him from the campaign. They also lost Malichus I's support, a strategic blow. Skirmishes around Actium in summer 31 BC saw defections to Octavian, including Delius and allied kings. While some urged retreating inland, Cleopatra insisted on a naval confrontation to keep Octavian's fleet from Egypt. On September 2, 31 BC, Octavian's naval forces, led by Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, met Antony and Cleopatra's fleet at the Battle of Actium. Cleopatra, aboard her flagship, the Antonias, commanded 60 ships at the fleet's rear, possibly a move to marginalize her. Antony had ordered sails on board for pursuit or escape, which Cleopatra, focused on Egypt's defense, used for a strategic withdrawal to the Peloponnese, moving swiftly through the combat zone. Roman writers later accused her of cowardly desertion, but their intention may have been to break the blockade and salvage the fleet. Antony followed Cleopatra, boarding her distinctive purple-sailed ship, and they escaped to Tainaran. Antony avoided her for 3 days until her ladies-in-waiting urged him to speak. The battle continued without them until September 3, followed by massive defections to Octavian. After Actium, Antony and Cleopatra landed at Paraetonion in Egypt. They separated. Antony went to Cyrene to raise troops, while Cleopatra returned to Alexandria's harbor, attempting to mislead opponents and portray Greece's events as a victory-fearing rebellion. It is uncertain if she executed Artavasdes II then, sending his head to his rival for an alliance. Lucius Pinarius, Antony's Cyrene governor, learned of Octavian's victory before Antony's messengers, executing them and defecting, surrendering 4 legions Antony sought. Antony nearly committed suicide but was stopped. In Alexandria, he built a reclusive cottage, the Timonian. Herod, who advised Antony to betray Cleopatra, met Octavian, resigning his kingship out of loyalty, which impressed Octavian, who allowed him to retain Judea, further isolating Antony and Cleopatra. By late summer 31 BC, Cleopatra perhaps saw Antony as a liability and prepared to leave Egypt to her son Caesarion. She planned to abdicate, move her fleet from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, and sail to a foreign port, possibly in India, for recuperation. However, these plans were thwarted when Malichus I, advised by Octavian's Syrian governor Quintus Didius, burned Cleopatra's fleet in revenge for losses in a war with Herod, which Cleopatra had largely initiated. With no other option, Cleopatra remained in Egypt to negotiate with Octavian. Though likely pro-Octavian propaganda, it was reported that she began testing various poisons on prisoners and even her own servants during this desperate time. Cleopatra had Caesarion enter the Ephebi ranks, demonstrating her intent to groom him as Egypt's sole ruler, supported by a stele from Coptos dated September 21, 31 BC. Antony, in solidarity, had his son Marcus Antonius Antulus also join the Ephebi. Separate envoys from Antony and Cleopatra were sent to Octavian in Rhodes, who seemingly only replied to Cleopatra. She requested her children inherit Egypt and Antony live in exile, offering future money and immediate lavish gifts. Octavian sent diplomat Theusos after Cleopatra threatened to burn herself and her treasures in her tomb. Theusos advised her to kill Antony for her life, but Antony, suspecting foul play, had Theusos flogged and returned to Octavian, ending negotiations. After fruitless negotiations, Octavian invaded Egypt in spring 30 BC, stopping at Ptolemais in Phoenicia, where Herod supplied his army. Octavian swiftly took Pelusium, while Cornelius Gallus defeated Antony's forces near Paraetonion. Octavian advanced quickly to Alexandria. Antony returned, winning a small victory over Octavian's tired troops outside the Hippodrome. However, on August 1, 30 BC, Antony's naval fleet surrendered to Octavian, followed by his cavalry. This marked the decisive end of Antony's military power, leaving him vulnerable and setting the stage for the final tragic acts of his life and Cleopatra's. As Octavian's forces closed in on Alexandria, sealing their fate. Cleopatra concealed herself in her tomb with attendants and sent Antony a message claiming she had committed suicide. In despair, Antony responded by stabbing himself in the stomach, taking his own life at 53 years old. Plutarch recounts that Antony was still dying when brought to Cleopatra's tomb, telling her he died honorably and to trust Octavian's companion, Gaius Proculaeus. However, Proculaeus infiltrated her tomb using a ladder and detained the queen, preventing her from burning herself and her treasures. Cleopatra was then permitted to embalm and bury Antony within her tomb before being escorted to the palace, now a prisoner of Octavian. Octavian entered Alexandria, seized the palace, and took Cleopatra's 3 youngest children. When she met him, Cleopatra declared, "I will not be led in a triumph," a rare recorded quote. Octavian promised to keep her alive but revealed no plans for her kingdom. A spy informed her of Octavian's plan to move her and her children to Rome in 3 days, prompting her to prepare for suicide, determined to avoid being paraded like Arsinoe IV. Her death on August 12, 30 BC, at 39 years old, occurred either in the palace or her tomb, with her servants Iras and Charmian also taking their lives. Octavian, angered, buried her royally beside Antony. Cleopatra's physician, Olympos, never explained her cause of death. The popular belief, often attributed to Octavian's propaganda, is that she allowed an asp or Egyptian cobra to bite her. Plutarch recounts this, but also suggests a scratching implement was used to introduce the toxin. Dio mentions a needle injection, and Strabo suggests an ointment. Horace and Virgil corroborate the snake theory but mention several serpents, further hinting at propaganda. No snake was found, but tiny arm puncture wounds were noted. This enduring mystery surrounding her death has fueled centuries of speculation and artistic interpretation, cementing her enigmatic legacy in history. In her final moments, Cleopatra sent Caesarion to Upper Egypt, perhaps planning his escape to Kushite Nubia, Ethiopia, or India. Caesarion, now Ptolemy XV, lived only 18 more days, executed around August 29, 30 BC, after returning to Alexandria under the false pretense that Octavian would allow him to be king. Octavian, advised by the philosopher Arrius Didymus, believed there was room for only one Caesar in the world. With the fall of the Ptolemaic kingdom, the Roman province of Egypt was established, marking the end of the Hellenistic period. In January 27 BC, Octavian was renamed Augustus, the revered, and amassed constitutional powers that established him as the first Roman emperor, inaugurating the Principate era of the Roman Empire. Following Macedonian tradition, Cleopatra ruled Egypt and territories like Cyprus as an absolute monarch, serving as her kingdom's sole lawgiver. She was also the chief religious authority, presiding over ceremonies for both Egyptian and Greek deities. She oversaw the construction of temples to various gods, a synagogue for Egyptian Jews, and even the Caesareum of Alexandria, dedicated to the cult worship of Julius Caesar. This demonstrates her comprehensive role, blending political, religious, and administrative power, and her efforts to integrate Roman influence while maintaining Egyptian traditions, solidifying her image as a powerful and multifaceted ruler in a complex, multicultural realm. Cleopatra was deeply involved in her domain's administration, addressing crises like famine by ordering royal granaries to distribute food during a drought early in her reign. While a study suggested volcanic eruptions contributed to her demise by causing unfavorable climate, this remains debated. Though her command economy was more aspirational than real, her government attempted price controls, tariffs, state monopolies, fixed exchange rates, and strict laws keeping farmers in their villages during planting and harvesting. Financial difficulties led her to debase coinage, issuing silver and bronze but no gold coins, unlike some predecessors. This highlights her hands-on approach to governance and the economic challenges she faced in maintaining her kingdom's stability.